I thought I was protecting my family when I installed that monitoring app on our shared laptop. Turns out, I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just building the cage I'd eventually lock myself inside. Let me be clear about something from the start. I'm not a controlling husband. I never checked my wife's phone, never demanded passwords, never questioned where she went or who she talked to. For 12 years of marriage, Sarah and I had what everyone called the perfect relationship. We were that couple. The ones who still held hands at dinner parties, who finished each other's sentences, who made our friends simultaneously envious and hopeful about love. But 6 months ago, everything I thought I knew became a lie so twisted, so completely inverted, that I still wake up some nights unsure which version of reality I'm living in. It started innocently enough, the way most disasters do. Our 13-year-old daughter, Emma, had been spending increasingly bizarre amounts of time online. Not unusual for a teenager, except her grades dropped from straight A's to C's in a matter of weeks. She became withdrawn, stopped eating dinner with us, and I'd catch her crying in her room with her laptop slammed shut the moment I entered. Sarah worked as a graphic designer from home, and I was a software consultant who traveled 3 days a week. We were comfortable, upper middle class, living in a suburb where the biggest scandals involved HOA violations and whose dog wasn't being leashed properly. Our biggest worry should have been whether Emma would get into her first choice college. So when I suggested installing parental monitoring software on the family computer Emma used for homework, Sarah readily agreed. "Whatever keeps her safe," she said, kissing my forehead as she said it. That kiss felt different somehow, but I dismissed it. Paranoia wasn't my style. The software was sophisticated. It logged keystrokes, took periodic screenshots, tracked browsing history, and backed everything up to a cloud dashboard only I could access. I set it up on a Tuesday evening while Sarah took Emma to her therapy appointment. Yes, we'd gotten her into therapy. We were those parents, proactive, concerned, doing everything right. For the first week, I barely checked the monitoring dashboard. Honestly, I felt guilty about it. Spying on your own kid, even for good reasons, sits heavy in your stomach. But on the following Monday, while Sarah was at her weekly book club and Emma was asleep, I finally logged in. What I found made my blood freeze. The screenshots showed Emma's activity, sure, mostly YouTube, some social media, homework research, normal teenage stuff, but buried in the log data was something else entirely. Every Wednesday evening between 7 and 9 p.m., while I was traveling for work, someone else was using that computer. The typing patterns were different. The websites were different. And they were visiting something called the Arrangement Hub. I'd never heard of it, so I Googled it from my phone, not wanting to create a trail on our shared computer. What I found made me wish I'd never looked. The Arrangement Hub was a platform for married people seeking extramarital arrangements. Not quite a dating site, not quite an affair facilitator, but something in between, a place where people discussed, planned, and coordinated secret relationships while maintaining their marriages. The screenshots from those Wednesday sessions showed a user profile. The username was DesignQueen78. Sarah was born in 1978, and her career was graphic design. The profile picture was artistic and blurred, but I recognized Sarah's favorite scarf in it. The bio read, "Happily married but seeking intellectual and emotional connection my husband can't provide. Looking for something real that stays separate from real life." I sat there in our home office, surrounded by family photos on the walls, and felt my entire world tilt sideways. But what came next made me realize I hadn't even scratched the surface of what was really happening. The monitoring software had captured private messages. I knew reading them would cross a line I could never uncross, but my hands were already clicking before my conscience could stop me. The messages went back 4 months. 4 months of weekly conversations with someone named Philosopher King, discussing books, art, politics, feelings, and yes, meeting up. They met 6 times at a hotel downtown. The messages were poetic, deeply emotional, filled with longing and passion I hadn't heard in Sarah's voice in years. But here's what made it worse. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future. Philosopher King wanted Sarah to leave me. He'd outlined how they could make it work, how she could get custody of Emma, how I'd never have to know about him until the divorce was finalized. Sarah's responses were careful, measured. She wasn't ready to leave, she said. She loved her life, loved our home, even loved me. In the way you love a comfortable old sweater, she'd written. That phrase carved itself into my brain like a scar. I should have confronted her immediately. Any rational person would have. Instead, I did something I'm not proud of. I kept watching. I told myself I needed to know everything before I acted, needed to build a complete picture. The truth is, I was paralyzed by the magnitude of it. How do you confront the person you've built your entire adult life with about a betrayal this fundamental? For 3 weeks, I watched her Wednesday sessions in real time from my hotel rooms during work trips. I learned that philosopher king was actually Dr. Marcus Chun, a philosophy professor at the State University. I learned that they'd met at a gallery opening Sarah attended for work. I learned that he was recently divorced, childless, and apparently everything I wasn't: spontaneous, intellectual, emotionally available. I learned that my wife was a stranger. But in my surveillance, I started noticing other things. Sarah's messages to Marcus weren't quite right. She'd occasionally reference conversations I knew we'd had, but attribute them to Marcus. She described her life with me in ways that were subtly inaccurate, painting me as more distant, more cold than I believed I was. She was constructing a narrative that justified her actions, rewriting our history to make herself the victim and me the villain. This realization gave me a strange sense of anger clarity. She wasn't just betraying me, she was gaslighting herself about who I was to make it hurt less. Then, 3 weeks into my surveillance, something changed. Emma's therapy appointment ran late one Wednesday. Sarah's book club, which I now understood was her cover story, was supposedly happening, but she couldn't leave Emma home alone. I watched from my hotel in Chicago as Sarah frantically typed messages to Marcus, explaining she'd have to skip their chat session that evening. His response chilled me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You prioritize everyone else. When you get to matter, bring Emma. Let her stay in the hotel lobby with her phone. We need this time. Sarah's response took 15 minutes to type. I could see from the keystroke logs that she wrote and deleted multiple replies. Finally, I can't involve her like that. It's not right. Can we do Thursday instead? Marcus's reply was immediate. Forget it. I'm starting to think you're not serious about this. Maybe your husband is right for you after all. Safe, boring, and utterly closed off. That message sat between them for 2 days. And then Sarah did something that made me realize I've been watching the wrong story unfold the entire time. She didn't respond to Marcus. Instead, she opened a different folder on the computer, one I'd seen before, but dismissed as work files. It was labeled Project Phoenix, and I'd assumed it was a client project. The monitoring software captured her opening dozens of documents inside. They were journal entries, years of them, and they weren't about Marcus at all. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, before Marcus, before Emma's problems, before everything. It was titled The Experiment. I read it with shaking hands through the screenshot capture. I've decided to create a scenario, it read. Tom is a good man, maybe too good. He's never been tested. He's never had to choose me actively. I've just always been there, part of his comfortable life. I need to know if he'd fight for us. I need to know if he even sees me anymore, or if I'm just furniture in his perfect life. So I'm going to create a threat. I'm going to make him think he could lose me, and then I'll see what he does. My stomach dropped through the floor. The journal entries continued, detailing how Sarah had carefully constructed the entire affair scenario. Marcus Chin was real. That part was true. They had met at a gallery. But the relationship was a fiction. Sarah had befriended him, learned he was recently divorced and lonely, and then pitched him an idea. She'd pay him to play the role of an affair partner in elaborate text conversations, knowing I would eventually discover them. Marcus was an actor in a play Sarah had written, and I was the unwitting audience member she was studying. But why? The journal explained it in painful detail. Sarah had been feeling invisible in our marriage for years. I'd become so focused on providing, on maintaining our comfortable life, on being the good husband on paper, that I'd stopped actually seeing her. She tried to tell me, asking me to take spontaneous trips, to discuss art and ideas, to engage with her emotionally instead of just practically. I'd responded with promises to plan something soon. Once we're calmed down, next quarter, next year. I don't want him to leave me. One entry read. I want him to choose me. There's a difference. Right now, he's with me because it's easy and comfortable. I want to know if he'd be with me even if it were hard, even if I were complicated, even if choosing me meant confronting difficult truths about himself. The most recent entries from the past 2 weeks showed Sarah's growing regret about the experiment. She'd initially planned to let me discover the messages and see if I'd fight to win her back, prove I still loved her. But she hadn't anticipated how convincing the fiction would become, how real the hurt would be for both Marcus, who'd apparently developed actual feelings despite the arrangement, and how devastating it would be to watch me suffer silently through surveillance she assumed I deployed. That's when I noticed the date on one particular entry. It was from the same day I'd installed the monitoring software. The entry was titled, "He's Watching Now." I knew he'd eventually install something to monitor Emma, Sarah had written. Emma's been acting out because I told her to. Another part of the test, though she doesn't know why. I've been too obvious on Wednesdays, making sure my activity stands out. It's time for Act 2. Now I wait to see what Tom does with what he thinks he knows. Will he confront me? Will he fight for us? Or will he just suffer in silence? Watching his life crumble from a distance like he watches everything else, safely removed, never quite participating. I closed the laptop and sat in my hotel room, and I genuinely wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. My wife had orchestrated an elaborate psychological experiment to test whether I loved her enough to fight. And I responded by proving her worst fears correct. Ide Batcha. I collected data. I treated our marriage like a problem to be analyzed rather than a relationship to be saved. But there was something else in those files, something Sarah couldn't have predicted. Screenshots from Emma's actual activity, the monitoring I'd originally installed the software to track. Our daughter had been visiting support forums for children with parents in troubled marriages. She'd been researching divorce statistics and writing heartbreaking anonymous posts about feeling like her family was falling apart, and she didn't know why. Emma hadn't been acting out because Sarah told her to. She'd been acting out because she'd sensed the artificial distance Sarah had created, the staged coldness, the manufactured crisis. Kids feel these things in their bones, even when they don't understand them intellectually. Sarah's experiment wasn't contained. It had metastasized into our daughter's psyche. I had a choice to make, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I made it quickly. I flew home a day early, missing a critical client meeting. I walked into our house Thursday afternoon while Sarah was supposedly working in her home office. Emma was at school. The house was quiet. I knocked on the office door, and Sarah called for me to come in, surprised I was home. She looked beautiful and tired and guilty all at once. "I know about Marcus," I said. "I know about all of it. The messages, the meetings, the whole thing." Her face went through a cascade of emotions. Shock, fear, something that looked like relief, and finally, defiance. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I installed monitoring software on the family computer. I've been watching everything. She stood up from her desk, and I couldn't read her expression. "And what did you do with that information? Did you confront me? Did you fight for us?" "No," I admitted. "I watched. I collected evidence. I treated you like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be understood." Something in her face softened. "Tom, let me finish," I said. "I also read your Project Phoenix files. All of them. I know Marcus was paid to pretend. I know this was a test. I know I failed it spectacularly by doing exactly what you predicted, keeping my distance, analyzing the situation, never actually engaging." Now she looked genuinely shocked. "You read the journals?" "Every word. And Sarah, you were right. About all of it. I have been comfortable. I have been distant. I've been a good provider and a decent roommate, but I haven't been a husband, not the way you needed. I've been watching our life instead of living it." Tears started rolling down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you to see me again, to choose me actively instead of just defaulting to me. I see you," I said, and I meant it. "And I'm sorry it took a fake affair and surveillance software for me to realize what I've been missing. But Sarah, there's something else. Emma knows something's wrong. She's been suffering because of this experiment. She's in therapy because she can feel her family falling apart, and she's scared, and she doesn't understand why. Sarah's face went pale. Oh God, I told her to act out a little bit to make the monitoring software idea more urgent, but I thought she wasn't acting. She picked up on the artificial distance, the stage coldness. Kids are emotional sponges. We hurt our daughter to test our marriage. We both stood there in her office, the weight of what we'd done settling over us like ash. We've been so focused on our own drama, our own needs and fears, that we'd forgotten the most important thing. We weren't just a couple. We were parents. Our choices rippled outward. And in that moment, I realized the story wasn't about Sarah testing me or me failing her. It was about two people who'd loved each other so much they'd forgotten how to show it, who'd gotten so good at maintaining a life they'd stopped actually living one. The weeks that followed were the hardest and strangest in my life. Sarah contacted Marcus to end their arrangement. He'd apparently developed real feelings and didn't take it well, threatening to expose the whole thing. But Sarah was prepared. She had documentation of their arrangement, including payment records. He backed off. We sat him down together and explained in age-appropriate terms that Mom and Dad had been going through a difficult time, but we were working on it, and none of it was her fault. She cried and said she felt like she was going crazy, feeling something wrong, but being told everything was fine. We apologized for that specific gaslighting, even if it was unintentional. Sarah and I started real couples therapy, not the kind where you perform being a good couple, but the kind where you actually excavate the foundation and see if it's salvageable. We learned that we'd both been running elaborate strategies to feel loved instead of just asking for love. She'd run an experiment. I'd run surveillance. We both treated our relationship like a game to be won instead of a garden to be tended. I cut back on travel. Sarah quit taking on clients that kept her isolated at home. We started taking walks together every evening, just talking. Sometimes about deep things, sometimes about nothing. We took Emma on spontaneous weekend trips. We became less comfortable and more alive. The monitoring software stayed installed for a while, but not for surveillance. Sarah suggested we use it as a shared journal, both of us writing entries in a folder we could both see. No more secrets, she said. No more tests. Just honesty, even when it's scary. 6 months later, I found another journal entry from Sarah in that shared folder. It was titled The Real Ending. Tom discovered my secret folder, it read, and found exactly what I'd hoped he'd find. Not evidence of betrayal, but evidence that I needed him to fight for us. He could have divorced me. He could have punished me for the manipulation. Instead, he chose the harder path, actually changing, actually seeing me, actually participating in his own life. I tested him, and he failed the test I designed. But he passed a much more important one. When confronted with the truth, he chose growth over comfort. He chose us over pride. Turns out, I wasn't the only one running an experiment. Life was testing both of us. And maybe, just maybe, we're finally passing. I added my own entry beneath hers. I thought I was protecting my family with surveillance. Turns out, the best protection was just showing up, being present, choosing them every day, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. Sarah's secret folder wasn't what I expected. I thought it would destroy us. Instead, it saved us. Not because of what was in it, but because of what we chose to do once we both stopped hiding. We still struggle sometimes. Marriage isn't a problem you solve. It's a living thing you nurture or neglect. But we're nurturing now, both of us, actively and imperfectly. Emma's grades recovered. The house feels different, less like a museum of a perfect life, and more like a home where real, flawed people love each other anyway. Sometimes late at night, I think about that monitoring software, about how technology can make us feel connected while actually increasing our distance. How easy it is to watch someone's life unfold on screens instead of actually participating in it. How surveillance and secrets are just different flavors of the same disease, fear of genuine vulnerability. And I think about how close we came to losing everything because we were both too scared to simply say, I need you, I see you, I choose you. Not out of comfort or obligation, but because life is short and uncertain, and love, real, complicated, uncomfortable love is the only thing that makes any of it worthwhile. My wife's secret folder taught me that the most dangerous distance between two people isn't physical space or even emotional disconnect. It's the distance between who we perform being and who we actually are. Sarah created an elaborate fiction to test my love. I responded with elaborate surveillance to avoid confronting it. We were both wrong, both right, both human. The folder is still on our shared computer, but now it contains something different. Real conversations, honest fears, genuine dreams. No performances, no tests, no surveillance. Just two people who almost lost each other finally learning how to be found. And that, somehow, is more terrifying and more beautiful than any secret I could have discovered. Every story leaves a mark. If this one touched you, let the telling tree grow by your like and subscribe.